Hello and welcome to News Round, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. The headlines. Supreme Court of Nigeria upholds Adeleke's victory as the validly elected governor of Osun State, sets aside the appeal by Adegboyega Oyetola of the All Progressives Congress challenging the election. There was a beehive of activities at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, Atiku Obi among party leaders who observed the proceedings. Federal High Court in Abuja gives order to restrain the National Broadcasting Commission, the NBC, from imposing fines on broadcast stations in the country. Plus, jury finds former U.S. President Donald Trump sexually abused writer John Carroll in civil case. Once again, welcome. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Let's begin News Round with the Supreme Court affirming the election of Mr. Ademola Adeleke as the governor of Osun State. The Apex Court dismissed the appeal by the former governor of the state and APC candidates in the July 2022 election, Mr. Adegboyega Oyetola, challenging the election of Governor Adeleke. The judgment, which was read by Justice Emmanuel Agim, was affirmed by other members of the five-man panel.
Nigeria's Apex Court takes center stage as the July 16, 2022 Osun governorship election is about to be laid to rest. Supporters of Governor Ademola Adeleke of Osun State and Mr. Adegboyega Oyetola arrived at court ahead of the scheduled time for the delivery of the judgment. Mr. Oyetola is challenging the election of Governor Adeleke on two grounds. First, he alleges overvoting in over 700 polling units across 10 local government areas of the state during the July 16, 2022 Osun governorship election. He also alleges that Governor Adeleke had made false claims about his education status to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) prior to the election. However, the Supreme Court, in a judgment read by Justice Emmanuel Agim, said it found no reason to set aside the verdict of the Court of Appeal, which upheld Governor Adeleke's victory at the polls. The five-man panel of justices said Mr. Oyetola failed to produce any bimodal voters accreditation system (BVAS) to prove his allegation. The Apex Court ruled that nothing in either the Electoral Act or Regulations 18 to 23 of the INEC's guidelines made it mandatory for presiding officers in an election to transmit by BVAS the number of accredited voters in each polling unit to the back-end server. On the educational qualification of Governor Adeleke, the court also held that the appellant failed to prove his case. The judgment of the court is received with excitement by supporters of Governor Adeleke.
My client, Governor Adeleke, went all out to ensure that he secured the victory once again after what happened 4 years ago. And then the people gave him the mandate to rule. And that is quite commendable that by the grace of God that we're able to defend that mandate.
We are very happy because it has thrown more light into the electoral jurisprudence and guidance for not only lawyers and judges, but for the Nigeria community. The Supreme Court has, through this case, settled a lot of issues that will come before ongoing tribunals and courts.
The counsel to Mr. Oyetola is not available to speak on the judgment. Nevertheless, the coast is now clear for Governor Adeleke, and the people of Osun State are waiting to see how much progress his administration will bring to the state. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
And now to the presidential election tribunal, which has commenced proceedings, and the Labour Party and its presidential candidates, Mr. Peter Obi, are calling for a live broadcast. Counsel to the party and Mr. Obi, Mr. Adeleke Uzochukwu, made this request at the pre-hearing session of their petition challenging the election of the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Mr. Bola Tinubu. Lawyers and some members of the public, including the presidential candidates of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, are back in court for the continuation of the pre-hearing session of the presidential election petitions. The five-man panel of justices started the day's proceedings with a petition of the Action People's Party, who have applied to withdraw the suit. Chairman of the panel, Justice Haruna Samani, dismissed the suit after the respondents had no objection and subsequently adjourned the session for a few hours.
As a lawyer, I was prepared to take up this matter to the last minute of it. But things change. The brief is not mine. The brief is that of my client. Like one of the pressmen asked me 2 days ago, would you want to withdraw the petition? My answer was no. However, if I have the instructions of my client to do otherwise, I wouldn't say no to that.
When the court reconvened, attention turned to the petition of the Labour Party and its presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi. However, the lead counsel informed the court that all the parties met and agreed to ask for an adjournment to enable them file and exchange necessary legal documents and consolidate on processes filed and those yet to be filed. He told the court that there were many processes and motions yet to be filed, and an adjournment will enable an expeditious hearing and determination of the case. Consequently, Justice Samani granted the request for a week's adjournment, directing the parties to identify the serious issues for determination. However, counsel to Mr. Peter Obi informs journalists that they have filed an application asking for live coverage of court proceedings.
We are asking that the Honorable Court should allow live streaming and broadcasting of the proceedings of the court from day to day, whenever the court is sitting. Because it was something introduced by the colonial masters, but they have moved on, and we are still in the ancient age. So we feel that we should depart from that and adopt modernity, because some African countries are now live streaming their proceedings. I don't see why Nigeria shouldn't.
The Presidential Election Petition Court will on May 11 hear the cases of the People's Democratic Party and the Allied People's Movement, challenging the victory of the President-elect Bola Tinubu. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News. And staying with the election tribunal, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Mr. Bola Tinubu, are preparing to file a response to an application by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, who is also seeking a live broadcast of the proceedings of the tribunal. Mr. Abubakar, who is challenging the outcome of the February 25 presidential election, says that televising the proceedings would enhance public confidence in the judiciary. The tribunal adjourned the pre-hearing to May the 18th. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, arrives the Court of Appeal, venue of the Presidential Election Petition Court, to witness the day's proceedings. He is accompanied by some former governors and the former national chairman of the party, Mr. Uche Secondus. Present in the field courtroom are the lawyers from the PDP, APC, INEC, and the APM, who are also challenging the victory of the president-elect, Mr. Bola Tinubu. The first case before the five-man panel of justices, which is the PDP petition, and the party's counsel, Mr. Chris Uche, informs the court that parties in the suit have met and harmonized issues for determination and have agreed to eliminate objections while tendering from the bar during the hearing. However,
He is still waiting to get the responses from the other councils to his application for a live coverage of the proceedings of the tribunal. The councils assured the court that they would file their processes in a number of days. Meanwhile, the petition of the Allied People's Movement, APM, also came up for hearing. Counsel representing parties in the matter said that they have agreed to have a meeting on Monday and Tuesday to harmonize their processes. The tribunal consequently adjourned the petitions to May 18 for continuation.
We served the other parties the motion for the televising of the proceedings. They explained here that they are still in the process of filing their replies. Therefore, we could not proceed without their input. So we don't want to anticipate their response. That's why the matter and this motion and other motions have all been adjourned to Thursday next week. Definitely on Thursday, every party would have filed his replies.
We do not have any link or any relation with other parties that have withdrawn, and we are saying this with affirmatively and with all seriousness and, of course, with all responsibility that we do not have any intention of withdrawing our petition.
According to the parties, streamlining their documents to be tendered before the tribunal will hope an expeditious hearing of the case when they return on May 18. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
National Working Committee of the ruling All Progressives Congress has adopted Senator Godswill Akpabio from the South-South for the office of the Senate President. Addressing a news conference in Abuja after a meeting of the party's NWC, the National Publicity Secretary, Mr. Felix Morka, announced Mr. Tajuddin Abbas as the preferred candidate for the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. On the sideline of the meeting, some APC groups protested outside the National Secretariat of the party, demanding the zoning of the office of the Speaker to the North Central region.
As members of the All Progressives Congress jostle for leadership positions in the 10th National Assembly, the party has announced a zoning template for the position of principal officers.
The zoning agreement reported to the NWC is as follows. Senate President, South-South, Senator Godswill Akpabio. Deputy Senate President, Northwest, Senator Barao Jibril Kano. House of Representatives, Speaker, House of Representatives, Northwest, Honorable Abbas Tajuddin Kaduna. For Deputy Speaker, Southeast, Honorable Ben Carlo Abia.
Just as members of the National Working Committee of the party were meeting, some groups staged a peaceful protest outside the National Secretariat, demanding the zoning of the office of the Speaker to the North Central.
We are all here to call the attention of the APC National Chairman and to congratulate the President-elect in the person of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and to tell him that we, the North Central, have contributed immensely to his success. And we want to still tell him that we are being marginalized as regards the sharing formulas of offices in the National thank you so much. In the National Assembly, the 10th Assembly have not taken the North Central into consideration.
We are here today to make our statement open to the public and to the coming 10th National Assembly and the leadership of the All Progressives Congress that the North Central region of Nigeria deserves the speakership of the coming House of Representatives.
As the federal lawmakers in the 10th National Assembly await their inauguration, the party is hoping to address the grievances that are trailing the zoning arrangements.
Welcome back. The National Assembly has held an induction program for senators and members-elect of the 10th Assembly. The purpose of this induction ceremony is to educate lawmakers-elect on legislative business, which, according to the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, is extremely important, as more than 70% of federal lawmakers coming into the 10th Assembly are first-time lawmakers.
So that he can make...
For the next 2 weeks, these senators and House of Representatives members-elect will be taking part in intense training sessions on the business of the legislature. This induction program, put together by the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies and the National Assembly, is necessary to bridge the legislative knowledge gap for the incoming lawmakers, as over 70% of them are first-time lawmakers. The first action these legislators will execute after taking their oath of office will be to elect the principal officers of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Already, this momentous decision, which will shape the running of the federal legislature, is being hotly debated across the country, with lawmakers and various interest groups weighing in on which person should lead the assembly and from which region.
I think this is a decision that the APC, the ruling government, should make. But it will be very precarious for them if they don't make that decision quickly, because if they make that decision so late, people would have firm up in their decision to support any of the candidates.
It's been touted and stated that the deputy speakership position will come to the Southeast. If that is the truth, then being the only woman in the race for speakership of the House of Representatives and having toured and canvassed members for this support, it will only be ideal that I be considered and given a right of first refusal.
We are only awaiting the final decision of the National Working Committee of our great party, which I believe will come out very soon. And when that comes out, then we'll know what position is going to which region and what position is going to the other.
However, some federal legislators insist that lawmakers themselves should have the sole prerogative of choosing who will lead them in the 10th Assembly.
I think the dividing line clearly is whether we want an independent National Assembly or we want an assembly that's controlled by the presidency. For me, that is the dividing line.
Allows the legislature to do their own to rules of provision of the Constitution, vis-a-vis allows the executive to do their own. I think when we respect the Constitution, when we respect the tenet of democracy, we'll get it right.
After the president-elect, Mr. Bola Tinubu, is sworn in as president, he will give a proclamation for the termination of the 9th Assembly and commencement of a 10th Assembly on a date most likely in June, which will be the day the federal lawmakers will elect who will lead them. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
President Muhammadu Buhari has written to the Nigerian Senate to request approval to borrow the sum of $800 million from the World Bank. The president says that this is to enable the federal government to make available palliatives like the conditional cash transfer of money to over 10 million poor Nigerians to cushion the effects of the proposed removal of petroleum subsidy.
Request for approval for additional financing of the National Social Safety Net Program scale-up by the National Assembly. It is with pleasure that I forward the above subject to you. Please note that the Federal Executive Council, FEC, approved an additional loan facility to the tune of USD 800 million to be secured from the World Bank for the National Social Safety Net Program, and the need to request for your consideration and approval to ensure early implementation. Copy of FEC extract attached. The Senate may wish to note that the program is intended to expand coverage of shock responsive safety net support among the poor and vulnerable Nigerians. This will assist them in coping with the costs of meeting basic needs. You may wish to note that the federal government of Nigeria, under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, will transfer the sum of 5,000 naira per month to 10.2 million poor and low-income households for a period of 6 months, with a multiplier effect on about 60 million individuals.
The Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, says that henceforth, state governments will provide feeding and accommodation to prison inmates in their states. He stated this at a two-day high-level conference on decongestion and corrections administration in Abuja. According to him, this decision is necessitated by the fact that the federal government currently spends over 22 billion naira to feed inmates across the country.
This multi-stakeholders meeting is organized to chart a roadmap for decongesting Nigeria's overcrowded correctional facilities. Across its 244 correctional centers, Nigeria currently has over 75,000 inmates in custody, and this has a ripple effect on the country's dwindling revenue, according to the federal government.
The government has budgeted this year, 2023, 22.44 billion naira just for feeding of inmates.
Among the causative factors identified are delay in prosecution of cases and the criminalization of petty offenses by security agencies. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Olukayode Ariwoola, emphasizes the need for effective collaboration among the three arms of government.
As for us in the judiciary, this is a reminder of the obvious, interpreting the law the way it should be, and with the fear of the Almighty God at the center of our heart. Our overweight visit to custodial centers will also be increased, with few to setting free those inmates with minor offenses and those that ought not to be there in the first place.
The federal government has also put in place some measures to address the challenge, as announced by the Minister of Interior, Mr. Rauf Aregbesola.
States are now empowered to, first of all, enact their own law, establishing correctional service, and build custodial facilities. Going forward with that law, states that don't have their own facility, you pay for your inmates. Federal government cannot bear this burden anymore. It's no longer a responsibility to feed everybody.
At the end of the conference, a blueprint document is expected to be developed that will guide decision-making on effective implementation of non-custodial measures to promote effective reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration of inmates. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court Abuja has given an order of perpetual injunction restraining the National Broadcasting Commission from imposing fines on broadcast stations in Nigeria. The judge also set aside the 500,000 naira fine imposed on each of the 45 broadcast stations on March 1st, 2019. Delivering the judgment, Justice Omotosho described the NBC's act as ultra-vires, also holding that NBC, not being a court of law, had no power to impose sanctions as punishment on broadcast stations. He further said the NBC Code, which gives the Commission the power to do so, is in conflict with Section 6 of the Constitution that vests judicial power on the court of law. And finally, on News Round, a jury in a civil case has found former President Donald Trump sexually abused a magazine columnist in a New York department store in the 1990s. But Mr. Trump was found not liable for raping John Carroll in the dressing room of Gedroth Goodman. The jury also found Mr. Trump liable for defamation for calling the writer's accusations a hoax and a lie. The Manhattan jury of 6 men and 3 women who reached their decision after less than 3 hours of deliberations ordered Mr. Trump to pay her about $5 million in damages.
I think it's an inconsistent verdict, right? And it's something that obviously will be another issue for appeal. But Jim, the issue for the appeals were laid really months ago when things like, Donald Trump's attempt to have the dress tested for DNA after they sent it into a lab and didn't come up with semen, I think that's something that was important. The fact that the Reid Hoffman, the Democratic financier, who Ms. Carroll was not candid about when she testified initially under oath in her deposition, that should come into this case. The Access Hollywood tape should not come into this case. There's a federal rule called 403 that balances out inflammatory and prejudicial things, and that certainly was one of them. So, but there's plenty of issues to appeal. And look, that's what happens, right? We're in one sense gratified, and I know some people in this camp are very happy that the rape claim was rejected, but I'm not, and I am happy about that, certainly, but I'm not happy that he was found liable for anything whatsoever, because on this evidence, I think he should have been.
And this is where we draw the curtains on News Round for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and stay safe.